Imagine this, a liquid so simple, yet so transformative, that it quietly shaped human civilization long before we even had words for science or society. I'm talking about beer. Not just any drink, not some casual buzz you sip on a Friday night, but the original fermentation experiment that connected humans to agriculture, labor, trade, and even religion. This is where things get wild, because beer wasn't invented to party, it was survival. It was fuel. It was a medium that unknowingly carried human knowledge forward. Now, let's rewind roughly 10,000 years. Humans had begun settling, farming, and domesticating grains. In China, archaeologists found pottery with residue of fermented rice, honey, and fruit. These weren't cocktails, they were early experiments in turning starch into alcohol. But the kicker, this wasn't about getting drunk. Fermentation made liquids safer to drink than stagnant water. It provided calories, nourishment, and a bit of comfort in an uncertain world. This was basic chemistry, but nobody called it chemistry. Humans had stumbled onto a process that would echo across millennia. Fast forward a few thousand years to the Fertile Crescent. In Mesopotamia, barley became a cornerstone crop, not just for bread, but for beer. And we're not talking casual enjoyment here. Beer was systematically integrated into society. Workers on construction projects received daily rations. Monks and scribes recorded the recipes in cuneiform. The Himtuninkhasi, dating back to 1800 BCE, wasn't poetry for the sake of art. It was a brewing manual set to verse. Imagine that, one of the first written documents in human history, dedicated entirely to a beverage. That's how seriously beer was taken. Over in ancient Egypt, beer played an equally monumental role. Workers building the pyramids weren't just fed, they were allocated daily beer rations, a practical blend of hydration and calories. The beer was thick, rich, almost porridge-like. It was a safety net for survival, and again, alcohol content was secondary. Beer, in these societies, was a staple of life. It fueled labor, reinforced community, and acted as a medium for knowledge transfer. Recipes, techniques, and quality standards were passed down, and beer became a metric of civilization's advancement. Jumping ahead, medieval Europe presents one of the most fascinating chapters in beer's evolution. Monasteries became unexpected centers of technological innovation. Monks weren't only praying, they were experimenting with grains, water, and fermentation. They refined malting, carefully controlled heat during mashing, and observed yeast's effects long before anyone knew yeast was alive. They introduced hops on a wide scale, a bittering and preserving agent that transformed beer's stability. Suddenly, beer could travel, could be stored, could become a reliable economic product. What might seem like a minor ingredient revolutionized trade and culture simultaneously. By the 15th and 16th centuries, beer had become so central to society that governments began codifying its production. The famous Bavarian Reinheitsgebot, or purity law, was enacted in 1516. It mandated that beer could only be made from water, barley, and hops. Yeast wasn't even included because no one knew it existed yet. While it might sound restrictive, the law was revolutionary. It protected public health, stabilized markets, and standardized quality. Beer wasn't just a drink anymore. It was an institution, embedded in law and culture alike. Then science began knocking on beer's door. In the 19th century, Louis Pasteur's studies on fermentation revealed that yeast was a living organism. That discovery didn't just secure beer from spoilage. It reshaped biology, germ theory, food safety, industrial microbiology. These breakthroughs have their roots in the study of beer. And at the same time, industrialization was transforming the brewing process. Refrigeration, controlled fermentation, and standardized lager production allowed breweries to scale. Beer became predictable, consistent, and widespread, laying the foundation for a global beverage industry. Even more intriguing is the role beer played for the working class across Europe. In towns and cities, beer was often safer and more nutritious than water. It was fueled during labor, a source of modest calories, and a consistent dietary staple. Bakers, blacksmiths, dock workers, many relied on beer as a functional part of their daily sustenance. Monasteries supplied local communities, not just with prayers and guidance, but with a reliable source of nourishment that carried knowledge of brewing techniques and fermentation stability. Beer, quietly, was sustaining civilizations from the inside out. Crossing into the modern era, the United States presents a compelling case. German immigrants brought lager traditions, Czech brewers brought Pilsner techniques, and beer's role in society shifted subtly, but importantly, it was now part of daily life. not as a recreational indulgence but as a reliable staple during labor, farming, and communal activities. And then came the real test: Prohibition. From 1920 to 1933, beer was outlawed, breweries collapsed, recipes were lost, and innovation stalled. Yet the historical footprint of beer endured. Post-Prohibition, lighter and safer versions dominated the market, but the roots of technique, tradition, and process remained deeply embedded. When craft brewing emerged decades later, it wasn't creating something new. It was rediscovering centuries of accumulated knowledge. What's fascinating is how beer, over time, became a medium for science, experimentation, and technological refinement. Bubble physics, foam retention, yeast genomics. Beer continues to teach us things about biology, chemistry, and engineering. Modern brewers utilize advanced temperature controls, enzymatic optimizations, and fermentation analytics that would have blown the minds of medieval monks. And yet, the core process hasn't changed: grain, water, yeast, hops, simplicity meeting complexity, tradition meeting innovation. It's also worth noting that beer's story intersects with legislation, economy, and societal stability repeatedly. Governments taxed it, regulated it, and even fought wars over its production and distribution. Beer was woven into laws, guilds, and trade agreements. Monastic knowledge, worker sustenance, and public health initiatives all intersected at the brewery. Every innovation, every tweak, every experiment carried broader implications than just flavor. Modern historians often overlook this. They focus on branding, nightlife, and cultural memes, but strip it down, and beer's impact is staggering. It fed people, stabilized societies, propelled technological breakthroughs, and even shaped legal frameworks. Beer wasn't frivolous, it was foundational. Without understanding beer's evolution, from accidental fermentations to monastic innovations to industrial science, we miss a critical lens into human development. And here's the truth: every sip you imagine today carries centuries of trial, error, and observation. Barley was chosen not for taste alone, but for reliability. Water chemistry was adjusted for safety. Yeast was selected and cultivated without anyone realizing it was alive. Hops were discovered and applied for preservation. Every element reflects a layer of human ingenuity. When you appreciate beer historically, you realize it's a distilled narrative of problem-solving, adaptation, and innovation. So why does this matter? Because beer teaches a lesson that transcends alcohol. It's a story about observation, experimentation, and refinement. It shows how humans interact with their environment, manipulate biological processes, and embed knowledge into culture. It demonstrates resilience, surviving prohibition, wars, industrial revolutions, and adaptability, embracing science and technology, while preserving centuries-old techniques. Beer is history in liquid form, and acknowledging that gives us a richer understanding of human ingenuity. Now, before we wrap this up, take a moment to let that sink in. Beer is not just a beverage, it's a historical artifact. It's a bridge between agriculture and industry, between survival and science, between labor and leisure, without ever being casual about its role in the world. And this, my friends, is why understanding beer matters if you want to understand civilization itself. So here's the call to action. If you love digging into real food history, if you want stories that go beyond memes and TikTok snippets, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who thinks beer is just a drink. Explore the science, the craftsmanship, the evolution, because once you know the real story, you never look at it the same way again. You see centuries of human struggle, ingenuity, and refinement in every drop. And remember, history isn't always written in textbooks. Sometimes it's brewed